stellar person, who is George Pazovich, who's known to Pelee and has been George has helped us and helped the community in many ways in navigating our way through provincial laws and navigating our way to a position where we could live in harmony between the two groups, development group and people that want to conserve. This is forever a game it doesn't end. And George was very much instrumental in those few years when Nature Conservancy of Canada was attempting to buy land here and was successful in doing so. It's a huge benefit to Pelee. I believe that occurred, and that we have that opportunity to enjoy nature, but also to educate people as to what we should or should not do in living next to some of these reserves. George is currently, he's a right-hand man of our member of Parliament, and is advocating on our behalf. So this is my only chance to thank him, George. Thank you very much, because there are a number of things that are absolutely crucial for us to accomplish. The designation as of remote status is hugely important. That would enable us to have more money on hand to take care of the road that we drove on from West Dock to here. That's not the only one. We need to be looking at a lot of roads and shore protection and on it goes. But also in looking at getting the commitment that the federal government has made to bring us broadband and to make sure that happens in due course. Anyway, I would welcome George Pazovich, a friend of Pelee Island. That's what he is.
Good morning. Thank you all for being here. Let me first of all do a reciprocating tribute to Mr. Cheeson. He was talking earlier about how the island needs a hero, an advocate, the rest of it. There is, I think you just saw from that presentation, there is no better than Ron Cheeson. So please. You should also know that Ron was recently recognized by the Government of Canada with the Queen's Jubilee pin for his service to the island and to the country. So. Okay, so bear with me. This is not a smooth presentation. This is a presentation I did like 10 years ago or something. And I'm trying something with this mouse stuff. So, but if it's over there, I can't read my notes. So you're just all going to bear with me. The basic message I want to try to share some insight with today is that in order to have a sustainable island community, you must have a sustainable environment and a sustainable economy. And that to the degree that those two are out of sync is the degree that you're going to have challenges as an island community. So with that, we'll share with you some of the lessons that we referred to. I've been around government since '76, but in 2005, I was a private consultant. I was brought over to the island because the island was covered in like over 500 anti-M&R signs. It was sold by the municipality actually for $5 against the provincial government. It was a very polarized situation. And that just illustrates that sometimes problems have to get worse before they reach that critical point that it can get better. So I don't think we would have had the success we had in 2005 to 2008 if things had not been as desperate and as bad as they were. So I'm going to try and go through this. So in the beginning, there was some well-intentioned biologists, people that are friends of the snakes, the blue racer and the Lake Erie, which is really great. They would advertise things such as, you know, it's wonderful to spend a weekend with snakes, which some of us didn't get, but obviously appealed to some people. You know, sensation. And this is some of the people that supported the establishment of this group here. Government of Canada, Shell, TD, the Provincial Ministry of Natural Resources. This is a building that they built on the island to accommodate their researchers and stuff. They also built a, I don't know if this is the cookhouse or the shower house, but they built one of those. And the other one is either the cookhouse or the shower house. But they did all this, but unfortunately, they built it on endangered species land, which was illegal. While it's being funded by the very provincial government that's supposed to oversee it. It was really a weird situation. And the last part is, they had no building permits. The municipality was saying, hey, you have to have permits. And nah, it doesn't apply to us. So it was a problem. And this sort of illustrates how the snakes sort of felt to the island folks here. So you had the environmentalists that didn't seem to have a separate set of rules. And then you have things like this, which is controlled burn. And a lot of people say, wait a minute, I can't do anything with my driveway because the branches fell over the winter, and it could be hibernacular or habitat, but it doesn't have, they don't have to prove that it is, but it could be. And yet you guys can go in here and bulldoze all this for a controlled burn. So it just contributed to the distrust, the polarization in the community. And it led to this, where this is how some people started viewing the legislation in terms of how much common sense. Sorry if I'm in the way. Now there's a Phelps letter here. Now, Michelle Phelps here works for the municipality. I love her dearly. Of anyone in a small community where there's a turnover, I don't know, what would we count getting, like 9 CAOs in the last 12 years or something? This lady is a saint. And I want to give her applause for that. When I first met her, they had 3 acres. They lived on 1 acre, then there's 2 extra acres. When the researchers came over to that, to the research of the snakes, she said, great, come on in, do your research. Her young boy at the time, who now works for the municipality, was enthralled by seeing what they did. The end result was, at the end of that, a couple months later, they came back and said, hi, your land is deemed an endangered species. So they lost control of their whole property while trying to be cooperative. So that was Michelle's situation. So then we had these folks, the K-Woods, that were building a house on the East Shore there. And what they wanted to do was move these rocks. They wanted to move these rocks here, over to here, and put down some pylons. And then they'd move them back. And this was for the, to build the house on top of it. That was polarized for like 1.5 years. So they weren't getting anywhere. And this is the enforcement officers with their guns looking over the situations. And that's your K-Woods down there. Okay, I'm going to back up here a bit. So the problem was, the province said that the Endangered Species Act of 1971 was like 1.5 pages. It was so ambiguous that they didn't have clear direction from the government of what constituted the laws that they could impose. So, long story short, we had a public meeting here, which I'll go into later, and out of that meeting, we were stuck on the island for 2 or 3 days because of the high winds. But out of that accident came a shared understanding. And what happened was, the district manager for the natural resources said, look, the only way we're going to be able to resolve this is for you guys to break the law, have us come over and charge you, and let the courts decide and interpret, because we have no other instrument by which to do that. It was just really insane. So that's what they did. They came over, they charged the K-Wood, they went to the engineer in Windsor, took his filing cabinets and the rest of it. It was just really, they came over in SWAT uniforms and the rest of it. It was a bit of a circus. It was really quite weird. So at the same time this is going on, the CoOp brothers had bought the quarry. And I'll show you later on what they thought they had and what the reality was. So they started after, I don't know, 4 or 5 years of waiting for an approval for their operation of quarry license. And they received this first letter from Alec Denai, who was a new district manager at the time, saying, hi, here's your permit subject to some conditions. And then a month later, they got nothing. Well, actually, there's these other conditions. And then there was this last letter a month later, basically saying, your property is sterilized, you can't do anything with it. And by the way, we're willing to work with you. So that was pretty crazy. So while this is going on, really interesting things were happening on the island. So, oh, sorry, I'm gonna get used to this split screen thing here. So there was this log that appeared along the inside border of the property of the quarry. But it's cut itself in half. It grew a hinge on itself. It stuck itself with wood chips. Okay? Then miraculously, pieces of tin were like Dorothy and the Wizard of Oz were mysteriously coming down and landing all along the inside of the property, which just happened to make it very conducive to warn the snakes. But there was no conspiracy, we were assured. So, and they contorted themselves in the most interesting pieces when they flew from the air. So all this is going on. This is what the island, the quarry thought they owned. Okay, that's the north quarry, this is the south quarry. By the time the M&R folks got done, this is what they were told that they could actually use. So, no. So here, you come in, Quarry Entrance, Endangered Species. The truck scale, like how the heck is a truck scale endangered species habitat? But that's how crazy this situation was getting. And then you come to the south quarry. So yes, you can operate your quarry. That's what the paperwork would show at Queen's Park. But you can't get to it. You're completely surrounded. So it was just well-intentioned environmental folks that just, again, you can't have a sustainable environment without a sustainable economy. And that's part of the challenges that we have. So obviously, the Islanders were not happy. Okay? So up went the M&R signs. And we felt even God was on our side. Okay? Like this is just crazy. And so, we were all, everyone was charged up here and the rest of it that, there's no way we're putting up with this. And it's true. I mean, we convey to the government, that when you're on that island, there's no backup. So, really don't get too stupid over here because some people are really getting fed up. So when I was brought over here in 2005, the CoOp was facing closure. They needed $1 million. Boil water advisory, after, as Ron was saying, the government in Toronto makes decisions, they came along here, smashed all the water wells to put in the new dock, and then disrupted the water supply system along the West Shore to the point where they needed to put in a whole new system, stuck them with the bill, and then also charged them $30,000 for not being in compliance. This was just getting really weird. There was over 500 anti-M&R signs, and it was a very dysfunctional relationship. Their official plan was rejected by municipal affairs. There was a solid waste order outstanding. There was a West Side investment plan for development, that collapsed. Drainage upgrades and maintenance. Police operations had a lot of limitations. There was concern over the winter air service because the tragic accident a few years before when those folks were killed when the plane crashed off the shore here. The American ferry service was desperately in problems. And the relationship with government agency was, well, this. Okay? So whenever Pelee came up with a province, it was like, oh God, these guys. Because Pelee was full of problems. Well, of course it is, because they don't have the capacity to solve their problems. So, I was hearing two things from M&R at the time. Officially, they were telling me they empathize with the island, but the way the M&R Act was written, the leadership was at a disadvantage given the act. And upon what basis could they overrule the science of the biologists? And then the second part was I told that basically, now stop me if you've heard this before. So this is what they told. M&R interprets the law. M&R, which is Ministry of Natural Resources. M&R can't share with us their legal opinions about how the laws may be interpreted because they are privileged opinions. M&R can't share with us all the mapping of endangered species habitat or what it is based upon because people may go out and try to destroy it. That the virtual martial law that M&R has placed over the island is only based upon the best guess of a few of its staff and not what is, but rather could be hibernacular. But we cannot challenge that assessment of your biologists because no one other than ministry staff will be accepted by the ministry as qualified to provide such an opinion. Can you follow all this? Jeez. And oh, by the way, the only appeal process to your decisions is to break the law and be charged by the ministry and then have the court decide. Unfortunately, if you're wrong, you can go to prison. So that's where we ended up with the cables. Now, obviously, the island response was pretty predictable. And that's not an exaggeration. Those aren't islanders, but I assure you that captures the mood of so many of them. So this is the situation we had when I first came here. And so today is a little bit about how do we go from this, so many anti-M&R signs all over the island, to, let's see if this works. It's not working. Basically what happened was in 2 years, we went from that to the new Endangered Species Act 2007, where it had a section 58, which exempted the minister from his very own legislation for a period of 1 year in order to finish resolving Pelee Island's problems. It was specific to Pelee, and what this shows you here, section 58, you can no longer find it because it was repealed. Once they've had that 1 year, and the first permit issued under the new legislation was the Pelee Island Quarry. So how do we go from being a pain in the arse, and 2 years later, we are the poster child for endangered species legislation? That's what I hope to quickly share with you if I can speed up and not take so damn long. So how do we go from this situation to this? How do we go from this to this, which is part of the and this is some of what we did and what we learned about today. So this chart here just shows you the scope, which a lot of you will know, to have a sustainable Pelee Island, environment, economy, and community. So we have the Canadian government, we have the Ontario government, all the different ministries, we have the municipal government, we have all the infrastructure issues of drinking water, Weststock, Kingsville Ferry Services. Up here we have natural environment, the government, fisheries and oceans, the health department, natural resources. Here we have all the community agencies, emergency services. Then we have the economy, development, food and lodging, sport. So when you put it on the chart, it really gives you a proper context that you cannot solve problems in isolation. Everything, especially on islands, are interconnected. You pick something here, it pops out over there. So the next part is, this is something that illustrates a bit, I won't try to go through it all, but illustrates a bit of how we try to take all of this and chart it into seasons to get us at the end goal here of a sustainable, economic and environmentally sustainable island, but it was predicated on the fact that we're able to get changes in the Endangered Species Act, because without that, no one's going to invest, no one's going to have a quality life for the rest of it. So, first thing we did, in this very room where you have the honor of being part of history today, we had our first town hall meeting. Now, it was so contentious that this room was packed. Like, there was like at least twice as many people here. It was so contentious that we knew who the people were that would be the most challenging, and we arranged to have supporters of a new way sitting on both sides. They were not allowed to speak. They had to write their questions, and I controlled the questions. Thirdly is we recorded the whole thing to produce a transcript, because there was so much that's back and forth. M&R said that. We did not say that. We said this. So we established on the record transcript of how all this worked. And we used that to have a future dialogue. So here we had the various folks. This is the guy with the gun, so we always paid attention to him. This was the mayor who became a good friend of mine, who just, to his credit, he and his council stayed out of the way and let us have it go at it. And because it was so bad that they really didn't have much option. That was the member of parliament, who was a liberal. I came from the progressive conservative part of the thing. We did not get along early on. By the end of it, I was the only conservative invited to his retirement party, Queen's Park. This is our dear district manager. This was part number, pick a number, that you guys have gone through so long. So we did this, and we had the meeting, and that meeting established a baseline. So we said, look, if you think this sign is keeping M&R off your property, you're crazy, because they, by law, can't go on your property unless they think, so the sign doesn't stop them. Unless they think there's a violation, which that sign doesn't stop them from doing their duty. Either way, you're wasting $5. So what we did was we took all those signs, and that's that earlier picture we saw, we put it in a banker box, and we sent it to Elmer, the district office. We said, let's stop. And then that's when the progress really started going where we could get along with. Then the next part was, and this is where Brother Thiessen was very helpful, because he's very passionate for the environment and not necessarily as familiar with the government processes, and who was this political hack that had come over here, but he was very generous and gave us a chance. But the question we framed was, how do we share the island? Let's forget the bullshit. How do we share the island as environmentalists and people that want economic activity? So we had a wonderful man who unfortunately passed away, someone I loved to bits, named James Duncan, who was in charge of those. Well, one of the things James did when we came over here, I said to him, look, we can either have a meaningful, honest work relationship, or we can talk through the front page of the local mail. Your choice. He chose that one. And from there, One Nature Conservancy bought that land that was endangered species and had all the stuff on it. So he made that right, but he wasn't aware of it at the time. So that was huge, and that was an important one step for the community to know that there is hope in the process. Number two is we said, how do we share this island? So they did a Biodiversity Index, and I'm going to skip forward here a bit. So they looked at the whole Western Islands in the archipelago, 22 islands, none of which are Canadian, and it went to Ohio. They did all that, and they came up with this rating that Pelee Island was at the top of it in terms of the greatest return on investment for increasing the biodiversity in the Great Lakes region. So that's Pelee, and they're followed by Kelly's Island, North Bass, Little Sister, and then it goes on down to Chick Island. So by doing that, so by doing that, we were, let me go back up here, sorry. We were able to identify that there's 5 areas there, the island. These 2 were already secured. This year, the Red Cedar Savannah, just sort of across the street, had just been purchased. 10 minutes, okay. These 2 were outstanding. So here in the island, this is where the snakes like to come in and hang out, but they also migrate over this area. Well, there was a bit of a battle. So here's the quarry, where the quarry went. The quarry here, so the quarry of this land here became for sale. Nature Conservancy, going through due processes, took longer, so the quarry bought it as a buffer to their property. Now we had a standoff. How is this going to be resolved if nobody trusted each other? Long story short, by the time we were done, we were able to make all this whole. This land here was sold to Nature Conservancy, and in return, the quarry got the certainty they need in order to operate. It was very much a win-win. If you cut out the bullshit, you can sit down and actually work things pragmatically of how do we share the island? How do we share what we each want? It doesn't have to come at the expense of the other. So anyway, so we did all this. So we changed that one. I won't go through all that. So one of the things we did, and Ron, you alluded to this a bit about people in Toronto. So our strategy was, look, we are one whole in a constituency, a riding. That was a safe Liberal seat at the time with the Liberal government. So we had no political relevance or power. Second is, the people, as Ron said, make decisions. We're in Toronto. They are looking at our island through words and pieces of paper. So our task was get them the hell out of their offices here on the island where we could talk with them and deal with them. So the first thing, so we had to create a chain effect. So the first thing we did was, I knew the leader of the opposition, John Tory, had him come down for a weekend. And so we did a town hall meeting. Whenever we did stuff, we did town hall meetings. And we had John with a very simple message to the McGuinty government. If you do the right thing, I will support you. If you don't, I will hold you accountable. The choice is entirely yours. So he didn't do the typical find a wedge issue to attack the government. He was trying to do the right thing. So we did that, but the important thing was we shifted and repositioned the island's issues from being one of a one poll in a riding that the Liberals had saved to now the leader of the opposition could ask the Premier a question at any time. And so this elevated it in terms of importance of the Premier's office, which helped trigger the idea of, you know what, we better get on with this Endangered Species Act, which they had mentioned, but they didn't really know how to go about approaching it. It was outstepping into a bunch of minefields. So one of the things was to get everyone out looking together at the same issue. So here's the quarry owner, here's the M&R district manager, Nature Conservancy, Conservation Authority, that's the inspector from the ministry. And then one of the things I recommend to all of you, if you ever deal with situations like this, especially with government bureaucracy, is find a champion. To us, this was our champion, the M&R supervisor, because of the court. Absolutely, the lady was amazing. She was committed to it, she believed in us, and she gave us that continuity inside the ministry. So we weren't bounced around. So find some anchor in the folks that you're dealing with in terms of government. Next, brought down the environmental commissioner. And it cost us, what, 2 cases of beer over 3 days or something? But he came down, he was another friend. And the biggest thing we got from him being down here again was to increase the political pressure, not in a threatening way, but elevated in terms of government's self-interest, which is always in their self-interest, not about us. We were able to do it. So this is what we got from Gore, and this is all we really want. Now the government had self-interest of why the island left. Because they had a problem, and Pelee was the best model in which to work at. And that worked really well. And then, of course, we got the first permit. This here, I'm sorry I'm running out of time, shows you some of the things we did. There's a lot of community meetings here. M&R, infrastructure, John Tory, we had the Minister of Natural Resources down, all these things. Everything we did, we always had a public meeting. And unfortunately, that stopped a number of years ago. But whenever we bring VIP, we always have a town hall meeting. In every town hall meeting, we would go down to every single person who wants to speak, we don't break. But we ensure transparency and cooperation. M&R minister came down, another M&R minister came down. We did even more meetings. We had lots of meetings. We did on-site visits. You have to get them out of their offices. And this is an Norman Rockwell photograph of the community thing with their dear friend, Mr. Thiessen. I always love this. Next is, again, you have to get into the nitty-gritty. Now here's a weird example. This is all of us dealing with Lake Henry. And so here was the M&R minister. This is the mayor. This is the member of provincial parliament, district manager, number 3, I think, at the time, Ontario Parks, Conservation Authority, Nature Conservancy, M&R Chatham, Lake Henry leader, who was really the one really pushing for this. Now the problem with this was we got everyone together on the site looking at the same thing. Do you think we resolved anything about Lake Henry? No. The whole side conversation was what boat the minister was going to go back on, because they had no PP boat. It's funny, but it's not funny. It was just, are you kidding me? Or whether it was the M&R boat, because it came on one. So we sent the MPP on one and the minister on another one. But it's what we had to deal with. So not everything goes according to plan. So the quarry had to change their positioning that quarries are good, provide jobs, taxes, and infrastructure. Because when I met a friend I'd known for 25 years, he said, I told him I was helping the local quarry. He says, why? And I said, well, why not? And he said, well, because they're evil, they're bad. And I, well, so we knew there was a problem we had to do. Which comes out to the issue of whatever you're doing, define or be defined. If you don't define yourself, someone else is doing it. These are some of the lessons we learned. Next thing is to establish mutually trusted ways, on whether that was sharing video with the cable or others. You need to get beyond the system and the operations and deal on a human-to-human basis. This snake here that was on the road, when a new district manager, number 3 or 4, came, they drove down the road, and one of the contract M&R employees was screaming that, you know, that's the Quarry guys, they killed it. And he's going, how do you know that? I just know it. So she was replaced, moved on to Windsor a couple of weeks later, because that equally was part of the problem. It wasn't, it's just a whole series of things. So that was important. So this is something to remember. This is politicians before the election, right? We all know that. Politicians after the election. So we have to keep that in mind. We haven't reached out to the government. So this is Dave Ellis, who is the organizer of this, and Dave Malik is another councillor, and that was the Premier of Ontario. So we bought a table at his fundraiser in London. We had the person from or Essex Regional Conservation Authority. We had Walter from the winery. We had the mayor. We had we had a councillor. We had the developer, and we sat there. I arranged to get someone from the minister's office to sit with us, and we humanized our relationship. We stepped aside from the stereotypes of government and activists. We came to know each other. And that was really important. We went to them on their terms and said, see, we're not scary. I know you've heard all these crazy things about us, but we're a profession, we want to work with you. And that really worked. The other thing to know is M&R is not a conspiracy, which is a lot of people thought. M&R is largely a lot of hook and bullet folks who just love it. Now that's changing the last 10, 15 years, but we had to deal with the Islanders, seeing them as conspirators. But it is changing. Next is we had to get beyond the words. We had to get people. There's Mr. Cheese. My God, you're like Kilroy. You know, Kilroy was here. All over here. And there's my dear, our dear friend, Dave. We miss him so much. And that's the Assistant Deputy Minister. Quick story about him. So this guy here was assigned by the government to head up the Endangered Species Act review, a new piece of legislation. He had spent the previous 3 years dealing with union contracts at Corrections Ontario for the prison guards. He didn't know squat about the environment or anything, but he was in charge of someone that see it through. So I wanted to come over the island like we did with the rest of them. And Craig Selby, the district manager, had told me I really needed to come the rest of it. And he just smacked it down and said, don't you ever try to tell me what I'm going to do with the rest of it. So that was polarized. So Craig told me, so I went to the Premier's office, and the Premier's office ordered Kevin, guy, that he had to come to the island. And you ever know those petulant kids, I'm not eating my peas? That's exactly what the hell he was like the whole trip over. But once we got him there, and once we were able to show him, he was able to see the map, like an example. Particularly, I remember that he really started changing when he showed him the waste scale. How's a waste scale, a sheet of metal habitat when it's huge? On the way back, we had the most wonderful conversation, both of us leaning over the side of the ferry for an hour and a half. He was so glad we had got him here, because he was able to finally understand the legislation. And from there, Pelee Island became the model that the ministry used to figure out, as Gordon Miller said, the environmental commissioner, solve Pelee's problems. Sorry, I'm really too long. Part of this is also stereotypes. It's very easy to be self-righteous when you're fighting. They're right, we're right, they're wrong, and they're bastards. It's a big shift for a lot of environmental groups and people, including me, to say, look, we've got to engage in dialogue. We're not going to make it by itself. Everyone know who said that? David Suzuki. Who said this? You and I are told we must choose between left or right, but I suggest there's no such thing as left or right. There's only an up and down. I've always believed that a lot of the problems in the world would disappear if we just talk to each other instead of about each other. Who said that? Ronald Reagan. So please get over stereotypes. And then, of course, John Lennon, you know, we're all together. Don't let facts go unchallenged, what we call facts, especially in this age of modern politics, right? It's just not true. And, you know, call things for what they are, you know, like just don't put up with it, let those things stand there. This was earlier, we said support the establishment of ESA policy. Part of the problem we had is that the Endangered Species Act dealt with species, but especially on islands like Pelee, what do you do when the geographical territories that are regulated for, say, 2 kilometers for the Jeffreys salamander overlaps with another habitat and they're in conflict? So we were really trying to say, look, this is an interim step, the ESA 2007, we must address the issue of spaces. Next is get over yourself. Okay, so this didn't really show up, but you see a really angry guy, and it's like, okay, you're going to deal with him, or you're going to deal with this guy. Be realistic about yourself. If you want to complain with government, sure. The lineups, I assure you, starts 2 blocks around. If you want to go to the government's solution and an option, they'll definitely be there for you. I'm really behind schedule, sorry. This one is unfortunately too much what it's like inside government. People call them. Don't embarrass your children. As Gandhi said, an eye for an eye makes the whole world blind. I'm just trying to speed this up. So this is our final dinner. So the current district manager, the former regional director, Craig Selby was an interim regional manager who was great, the regional mayor, and Alec Denai. Like, these two were just at loggerheads. Like, this was just crazy. We got along so well by being honest with each other and frank and accepting our own frailties that this guy offered to testify against his whole ministry in the court case against the quarry. And for that, they backed down and were able to get resolution. And today, that quarry is operating, very controlled, but provides the essential needs, is completely environmentally compliant. They had to plant trees, they had to create the habitat for the snakes and the rest of it. It was so easy once people got out of themselves and did things more practically. So, just briefly, a few other things here, and Christine and Ron sort of alluded to it. You have such a small tax base. And here in this island, about 30-odd% of it is tax-free in terms of the groups because of environmental exemptions and the rest of it. So that's one challenge. The other problem is a very small tax base. Third challenge is they have extra expenses over other people because they have to meet the standards, infrastructure standards for endangered species that the mainland folks really don't have to. Number 4 is just the nature of the island in terms of the drains, the dikes, and the rest of it. Number 5 is they just don't have a lot of political clout because they're out here in the middle of the lake and they sort of get forgotten. Number 6 is the fact that the island has all the characteristics of a remote or isolated community, but they don't qualify for it because they tend to view it beyond a certain geographical latitudinal level. The Board of Services here gets extra pay, like remote status pay. So those are some of the things we're working on. Things like the fiber optics. Again, you've got these poor people here in the office. They don't have enough administrative capacity to keep up the red tape and everything else the government imposes on them. And there isn't that sort of help. And we're losing our institutional memory so often because there's such a turnover of CEOs and the rest of it. They just can't get a break that every once in a while have. Last thing I want to leave you with is these folks died Brad had this opportunity. So let's just not blow it. Let's take it very seriously and respect that by not being idiots and finding a way to make this stuff work for what they died for. And we thank them for their service. And I will thank you. Matt Gale is the sales and marketing coordinator for Pelee Island Winery. He worked here as a younger person, as we all once were. I don't know Matt very well, but I hear a lot of very great remarks about him, so welcome, Matt.
Thank you very much. Just 1 second on this one.
Hey, Clay, good to see you. George, that was a great presentation.
So I understand on the thing standing between lunch and wine, so I'm going to make it very brief. I'm just here to, I'm really happy to be invited here today. I've been invited to introduce the wine to fine folks. Thank you so much for taking the trip over here. We really appreciate it and hope you enjoy your day. And it sounds like there's some amazing tourists that for the afternoon for you, so we're really looking forward to that.
Staff housing, we need more accommodations.
So I'd like to start my presentation by acknowledging that the land
So I
that
took
we gather on
which is zoned residential.
is the traditional territory that the Wandren, Neutral, Mishabeg, and Haudenosaunee peoples. It is through their connection to the land and waters that we look to their beliefs and values, that it is their responsibility of people to protect the environment and sustain us.
So I'm going to line up the studies.
Yeah, we're Pelee Island Winery here. On Pelee Island, we have 750 acres of grapes. We also do about 3,500 acres of cash crop farming, which is soybeans and wheat and canola oil.
This property saying, because there's other places on the island that are residential.
We produce about 2,500 acres of 2,500 tons of grapes, grape juice per year, and we're the largest estate winery in Canada. So that means we're the largest winery that is owned by an independent person and produces wine here. So, and we are kind of a unique winery in the fact that we do a large scale farming and estate winery. A lot of the larger wineries in Canada purchase most of their wineries from independent farmers who produce wine. We have our full size businesses are our large programs for farmers and we're winemakers at the same time. As Ron, I'll go over this really quickly because Ron touched on it so beautifully. We have a long history of winemaking here on Pelee Island, starting in 1954, going up to about 1914. Basically on the island, several different wineries